Hello, everyone. Let me share my presentation real quick. It's not a very big presentation that I have prepared. It is more of a talking is what I felt I should do in this session so that we can interact more. I can understand what are the things that you have doubts about in the database world. So that I can share my experiences with you. So it'll be more of a interactive sort of session if we can make it. And if you could come up with any doubts that you have, so we'll try to cover that in 1 hour that I have got. I know it is less to cover this much vast topic in 1 hour, but I'll try my best to help you, understand the concepts, some concepts in the database world. So I'm loading the PPT. Let me know once you're able to, it is still being loading, but let me know once it is ready.
All right, it came up.
It came up, okay, perfect. So team, this is me. I am Atinder Pal Singh, Senior Customer Engineer with Microsoft. I have more than 10 years of experience in the database world, and mostly it is in Microsoft, wherein I worked on a SQL Server technology and the database, plus the Azure technologies, the cloud world as well. And then I have some experience on Oracle database as well. And then I'm part of a lot of Microsoft communities, which, we answer some questions to our customers. And also we have certain, sessions that we keep on delivering to our customers or even our internal teams on the database world. These are a few of the certifications that I have listed, which I could acquire in the database world. So it talks about the data engineer, the database administrator, the data fundamentals, some professional certifications like Microsoft Certified Trainer, etc., plus the Oracle certification as well. So team, the agenda that we discussed and decided for today's session was that I'll be talking about the database journey, how the databases are evolved and how it is relevant to me or how I go into this journey. And then the day-to-day activities in my current role that I do on a daily basis while working for Microsoft and as a senior customer engineer. And then I'll give you one example of the application because you are all developers. So it'll be good that we share the insights about what sort of challenges that we see or the application teams see or the developers see while we look into their application, look into their design and all. So I'll be talking a little bit on that as well. So let's quickly start with the database journey. I hope everybody, it's not a secret anymore, like how databases evolve. It is available online. But it is just that I wanted to share how I see that. So, like for example, in the database world, we used to, have some earlier, like if you go back to 1980s, you will see that there used to be ledgers, there used to be registers where we used to maintain the records. Then the file systems came into existence. We started documenting things in Excel or maybe a Microsoft Access, right? So then over the period of time, the database starts getting evolved, and the Dr. E.F. Codd is one of the scientists who came up with the concept of relational database management system, because there were a lot of challenges in the existing system. For example, what if some disaster happened and the available data that were present in my registers is gone? I didn't had any high availability solution that time, and I didn't had any. If I need to maintain a high availability of a registry, what you mean is that you need to write on one register and then keep a copy on a separate register as well. So overhead, a manual overhead was there, and the maintenance was a challenge. If multiple people had to access it, it wouldn't be possible. So then with the relational database management system came into existence, there were a lot of companies jumped into this database platform. Microsoft is one of them. Microsoft SQL Server came into existence. Oracle, MySQL, Sybase, IBM DB2. So a lot of relational database management system softwares came into existence, right? So then we started working on these relational database management systems. And then what happened is it was getting tough to, again, how to manage the relational data. So even if, let's say, we have huge data that is being developed or over the period of time, the size is increasing, how to manage it, how to maintain it, how to ensure its high availability. So then, the software industry started to think about in those directions so that the databases can have all sort of these challenges that we had mitigated, right? And then you must be aware of one of the challenge that we had is 32-bit operating system, right? Just 32-bit architecture where we had very limited amount of memory. Because our data is growing, that means we need more compute power also. We need more memory to process our data and to optimize it further, right? So we had to think on those lines. Then the 64-bit architecture came into existence. Then software companies started to build their softwares in line to the 64-bit architecture. And then 64-bit with the architecture, we started to utilize more memory. The compute became faster. Even the memory became cheaper, so that more memory can be leveraged to process our workloads because the data is growing, right? So then again, we were able to scale up our systems. More memory can be utilized. Again, the concept of high availability and maintenance of the database was a problem, right? So then eventually the new inventions came in where high availability solutions came into existence. Like one of the, if you talk about SQL Server, a very popular high availability solution is Always On. So in Always On, we can synchronize our data, which is present in Mumbai location, for example, with Bangalore location in a real time. So one database present in Mumbai location can have multiple copies spread across Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, or Delhi. So multiple geographies, multiple regions, multiple data centers, we can replicate the data in real time. So those technologies came into existence. Then again, real-time synchronization also started. The new research also wanted something, let's say, for example, a merchant navy ship, right? So a merchant navy ship do not have internet when it's sailing during its sail time, right? What happens is then the data is getting generated on the ship as well. Maybe it is related to their employees, it is related to the products that they have, or it is related to engine, it is related to the life of a ship, something. I mean, XYZ data is growing there as well, right? Then how I can synchronize that data with my onshore, like if I'm coming, my ship is coming to shore to the port, then I should be able to synchronize all my data to the port application that I have. So how that technology can be created. So we came up with the concept of replication, wherein we can keep on accumulating the data, and then we can synchronize the data once the ship comes to the port. For example, your phones, right? So adding the data on your phone, and then you plug in the wire, and then you synchronize the data. So similar way, whatever the user application data is, you keep on synchronizing the data when, as and when the internet is available or your ship has come to the port. Team, any questions so far? I mean, please stop me if you have any questions because I'll otherwise keep on speaking.
At what rate data is getting generated?
At what rate data is getting generated is something, it depends on the industry. Like, for example, if it is a banking industry, the data rate generation is different. If it is some service industry, the data rate is different. It depends on the application.
How about
And
Instagram?
sorry.
How about Instagram? Like Instagram, YouTube, people are posting videos like every day.
So you can consider it like petabytes of data is getting generated. So it's massive. It's massive. So data, I mean, every social media is like massive data generation.
Right.
And then our database systems are so robust now that we are able to handle that data, and even you are able to see the real-time pictures or real-time videos on your social media accounts. And also, I mean, for that matter, if you talk about the banking customers, I'll give you one example, the application that I'm supporting on one of the banking example, like just to give you an example of the data generation rate. So you do the online shopping, right? So when you do the online shopping, maybe Amazon or Flipkart or any other site, you enter your credit card details. Once you enter that, you get an OTP, right? So that OTP generation itself is also coming from a database. So what we do in the backend is we actually see if you're, I mean, within that 1 second of time when you get the OTP, we analyze whether the user who has entered the information is correct, whether it is a valid user, is it a fraud, is it any attack, all those things we do validate within that fraction of seconds in the database world. And then we, after validating that, okay, your account has that much amount or not, all those things gets validated within fraction of seconds, and then you get the message OTP to process your transaction. So you just imagine how many people are using the credit cards at a given time. So you must have seen some of the banking applications do stop responding slow when during the sale periods, right? So you get OTP a little late. For example, in your Aadhaar applications as well, government Aadhaar maybe, or maybe a social security numbers. So you can imagine how much data is being generated at a single point.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah. And working with that is also very fascinating. It is even more fascinating to understand the real challenges and then uh, think about or apply your logical or your development thinking to how we can optimize that further as well. That is even more interesting. So that is how it is evolving actually. Because the data is evolving so fast, that is when we or research teams are actually thinking on developing more solutions. That is when the NoSQL concept also came into the picture. In the NoSQL, first of all, we talked about the relational database management system. Now we are saying no relational database management systems, right? So again, a lot of companies started to build on NoSQL databases because relational was something getting complex, and when we complex and when we were fetching that data from the relational concepts, because we have to adhere. If I'm inserting a data in one table, I need to ensure, or I'm updating the data in one table, if it has any relation with other table, I'll have to validate the thing on the other table as well, or tables as well. That became a bit of a challenge because that actually slows down the speed when it comes to massive amount of data. So with NoSQL, because we do not have the relationship with the concept of relational, we can process the data faster. And also the NoSQL concept came with a approach wherein in relational world what we were having a limitation was that we could scale up vertically, as in like I if I have a system, if I have a server, I have, let's say, for example, 20-30 terabytes of a database size. And to process the data, I can scale my RAM because of 64-bit operating systems, and starting with newer versions of operating system. We can scale it vertically. We can increase the RAM to a certain level. We can increase the CPUs to a certain level to optimize the compute power. But then that was also getting limited. We wanted some concept wherein our compute can be scaled up horizontally, so that I should have multiple servers to process my request because the data is huge. So if I have multiple servers, I can increase the compute vertically of those servers. I can utilize the memory, multiple memory architecture or multiple servers memory at a horizontal scale. And then I can utilize or I can leverage multiple servers to process my request. So that is what our Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all these social media, because they have massive amount of data, started utilizing the NoSQL databases. So that concept of horizontal scaling became very popular in cloud world. In Azure, if I may say, in Azure world, because we have a lot of options to scale up our environment at a real time. So let's say if I have like 10 nodes or 10 servers, you can say, imagine just 10 servers, I can offload I can divide my workload, not offload, but divide my workload across 10 different servers. So you can imagine the work that was being done by one server has now divided into 10 servers. So then my compute will definitely be faster, right? So, and because we could not achieve this thing on a scale at on an on-premises world, because in on-premises world you will have to provision your physical servers, or maybe you can create virtual machines, but up to what extent can you create? So that was a limitation where that is when our cloud computing came into picture. And in Azure world, we came up with the concept, okay, let's have some solution wherein we can just mention the number of nodes and we can increase the number of nodes. When I increase the number of nodes, I'm ready to pay more money. But if I am not processing anything at any given point of time, I should be able to reduce that workload also. I should be able to reduce the number of servers. So that is the beauty that we have got in Azure. Any questions, team?
Excellent, excellent.
Am I going a bit fast or is it fine? My pace is okay?
I think it is perfect.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Because I just want to, cover things. So I'll just try to give some examples as we talk. If you have any questions, team, just put forward that questions because as Gia mentioned, right? So with that question, I can, relate more towards my experience and I can share that experience. I can share how I was able to manage that situation or how the database world was able to manage that situation as well. If you can just pose the questions, I'll be happy to help on that as well.
So
Okay.
Atinder, when we spoke, you mentioned something called data is a new fuel.
That data is a new fuel, yes.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So data is a new fuel. Why people say that? Because you must have seen, I'll just give you an example that is related to NoSQL itself. Okay. So now you go to a shopping, maybe an e-com website, or maybe an Amazon, and you search for a product, right? And but you didn't buy that product, but you just search that product and then that's it. So in the back end, that itself is a data. Like what my user is searching on my website. So that in the back end, what will happen is, let's say I have searched for maybe an iPhone, right? So maybe a Surface or anything. So I have searched for it, but I didn't buy it. But that data, whatever I have clicked, it will go to my database, so that in the back end, what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to make some business decisions, as in I can just look at what my user, maybe let's say 100 users, what my 100 users are searching for these days. Or maybe based on which region, let's say in Bombay, or my user base is searching more on this product. But they're not even, I mean, even if they're buying it or not, that's a separate story. But then that will give me an insight to my business, as in what shall I procure more? What shall I show to my other users in the same region so that they can also start thinking on that product? Can I have more offers on that product in that region? So that decision making will start building up in the backend. So the data is continuously pushed in the databases. And you can imagine, I have not even bought a product, but still I'm utilizing that data to make a business decision. So imagine the scale of the data growth every day, right? So that is what we call it as a new fuel. And then this data, when it goes in the back end, we have certain, we are starting teaching our machines now with that data. We call it as a machine learning, or a designation who actually works on those products is a data scientists, right? So data scientists or data engineers are actually working on those lines. How I can make a meaningful decision, meaningful business strategy out of that data. What is your pattern? If you're exploring your social media, what is your pattern, or what is you searching on your phone? Even if companies don't say, let's say, I mean, I should not say that, but even if companies have some that we will not disclose your data, but at least that if they're not disclosing the data to anyone, they're still making some decisions out of that data. So they may be if for example, in a Facebook, if you're searching for something, you will start getting advertisements on top of it, right? Sometimes you would have seen, I just search for it, and then I keep on getting all the advertisements on my other social media account as well, right? So all these things are actually making business benefit a lot. Business are improving, right? So even I'll give you one more example. Sorry, if I may. For example, we're utilizing machine learning for training the cars. For example, driverless cars, right? So what they're doing is they're understanding the patterns. Maybe let's say you're using Google Maps. It can utilize that pattern also. How many cars are moving at what speed at when the traffic conditions are this much. So all this data is being pushed in the back end, and that data may be utilized to make these driverless cars, right? So it's a new fuel, yes.
Interesting. And this is all stored using NoSQL.
Yes, NoSQL. I mean, it's a not only NoSQL, it's a combination. So in the database world, we always have combination. The example that I gave you, right? The product, when you search for the product in social media, and similar sort of advertisements starts coming up, or they say a user have bought this also with this product, right? So what we do in the backend is we utilize a NoSQL concept called Gremlin database. Gremlin is also it's called a graph database, wherein we develop patterns in the backend, and then based upon those patterns, those recommendations can be made, and then you maybe that shopping or e-com website may have a relational database also in the backend, along with NoSQL, that can also be leveraged at the same time for different application to store the relevant data, or the data, for example, maybe you want to store the list of products. So that data can be stored in your relational database. And for this business decision making, or where you want to apply the algorithms, the machine learning algorithms, you can utilize NoSQL because it can massively scale. Could you read that for me, please?
Sure. So the question is, how does the data get replicated across multiple servers? How does database get synced across servers?
So, team, there are various technologies that we have developed for that as well. So, if I may give one example of always on, right? So, what happens is in always on case, we open a endpoints ports, the TCP/IP ports on both the servers. Okay. And then what we do is we establish a communication between these two servers. We call it as a TCP handshake, like any other application does, right? So the packets are transferred using these ports, the two ports which are open on both the servers, or maybe on 5 different servers, for example. So what will happen is whatever data comes to my primary server, that is, for example, Mumbai server, I have given every single transaction a unique number. For example, your license number is unique, right? Or your Aadhaar card number or social security number is unique. So what we do is for every single insert that you do in a database, any single update, delete, create, alter, anything, any statement that you execute in a database, we give a unique number to that transaction or a statement. Then what we do is whenever that data comes to the primary replica, I utilize that transaction number, and I push that transaction directly to the other server also. And then that happens is like we have something called log buffers, that is the memory area. First of all, whenever data comes, we write into the memory, and then that log buffer is then pushed to the secondary replica, and then we read the data. I mean, the secondary server also follows the approach to continuously read the data which is being pushed from the primary server, and then we ensure that, okay, I match my transaction, that transaction number, that is a unique number, is it already hardened on my secondary server or not? If not, let's do it. That a continuous recovery process keeps on happening in the backend. And that is when we continuously write the data in our secondary server. Once the data is written in our secondary server, we send the acknowledgement back to our primary server that the data I have already written on my secondary server. Now you also go ahead and harden the data. By hardening, what I mean is from memory to disk, write the data which is in memory, push to the disk. That is the physical file on the server. So that is how we utilize this technology. This is just one of the technology example. So there are similar technologies. For example, there is one technology called log shipping. What happens in that is we continuously take the backup of the data changes. Let's say after every 15 minutes, I'll take the backup. If that is not a very heavy application, I continuously take the backup after 15 minutes, and then I'll copy paste, like same copy paste operation that you do for any file, right? Because the backup is also a physical file, I'll copy that backup file from one server to another server by an automated job. Simple job that we can create in a SQL Server world also. Then once the data is copied to the secondary server, I will restore the data. Simple restore on statement on the SQL Server machine, and then I'll keep on restoring it after every 15 minutes. So that is another way. I mean, this was actually the thing that was invented earlier, but then the thing that I talked later, that is always on, that came once we saw the limitations in this copy paste operation. Because in copy paste operation, you can imagine the data loss can be 15 minutes, because if I'm taking the backup which is not yet copied to my secondary server, what will happen is that data can be lost. That 15 minutes data, if let's say some disaster happens in Mumbai, and let's say some fire incident happened, so what will happen is that database is crashed. But that 15 minutes of data that you've already written into your database, that has not moved to the secondary server. So that is the business loss. Just imagine in case of a banking environment, if some transaction has happened and that transaction has not moved to the secondary server, let's say you have, sometimes it can be good also, no? If you, let's say, have withdraw some 2 lakh rupees, and then the transaction, the server got crashed and it has not moved to the secondary, and bank does not have any record. If you have any transaction, if you haven't done any transaction, that will be a business benefit. That will be your benefit. But yeah, in order to mitigate those challenges, also the always on came into picture. That first of all, you write the data to the secondary server and then commit the data to primary server. So this is one of the technology I'm talking about. We have gone a way beyond this also, if we talk about the cloud world. And also in the cloud world, what we say is, don't put your efforts on designing the high availability solutions, or don't worry about synchronizing this data from one server to another. We will manage it. The cloud team, because we know the product very well, in the backend, the product group is working on the cloud platform. And then what we do in the backend is we will ensure the high availability is implemented you just need to have to click on a region. Let's say you have a region in Mumbai, you have bought a server in Mumbai cloud data center. You just need to choose maybe a Hyderabad data center, or maybe your customer base is in US also. Let's say you can just click on the map. You can pick up the New York location. We will ensure in the backend to synchronize your data to a New York location also. So it might not be a real-time sync, but it can be like some latency. With some latency, the data can be pushed to the secondary server as well. I hope I was able to answer your question. You can unmute. Sorry, who has asked the question? You can unmute and you can say that as well.
Sure, sir. I understood the answer.
All right, Pushkar. Thanks for asking the question. So team, anyone else, anyone want to ask any question, please feel free. I'll be happy to help. Because then a lot of things comes into the picture. You'll be able to relate more.
Hey, hi, this is Ajit.
Hi, Ajit.
Yeah, actually, I want to ask the question regarding how the big organization like a Microsoft, okay, how the relational database design will happen. Suppose if any application or new enterprise like a banking application or a social media application, how the design will happen. Okay, so we will understand into our small organization as well. Okay. How that approach is applied.
So like in Microsoft, if you say like since we're not banking, so that design we will not do. What we will do is we will work on our internal websites that we have, and we will design our internal applications. But if it is something outside of Microsoft, we have a team who design that architecture as well based upon customer requirements. Let's say if we are designing some application, there are a lot of phases that can come into picture, that how to design, whether you want to have a SQL database based on, let's say you have a requirement of maybe a social media analytics, maybe you want to set up something on Twitter feeds or maybe LinkedIn feeds. So what you will do is you will first have to think on, okay, how much data is what I'm expecting now, down the line 6 months, 1 year. So a projected sort of understanding of how you are expecting the data can grow. Okay, then you come to platform. Whether I want to do it on-premises world, or will I be able to suffice? I'll have sufficient compute for like 10 years down the line. I will be able to cope up with that workload, or I'll be able to, let's say if I have to scale, how do I scale down the line for 10 years? So now hardware also gets older, right? So after 5 years, your hardware might not be in warranty. So you consider those points to understand which platform you want to choose, whether you want to choose a platform which is like can be updated frequently and you don't need to bother about it, right? So I mean, if you're just talking about the LinkedIn or Twitter feeds, then I'll choose, let's say I choose Azure platform, and in that Azure platform, then I will think upon what database technology should I use. Shall I use my NoSQL database, or shall I use my relational database management system? If I use my relational database management system to store a data, then what sort of data I should store in my relational database management system? Do my management need historical information to make our business decisions? Since we're saying data is a new fuel, how can I leverage my data to make business decisions? If I want to do that as well, what technology should I plug into my relational database management system? For example, I have a SQL, and then what I should plug in with along with SQL. Let's say I can pull the data from my SQL to my maybe OLAP systems or my data warehouse systems. So I can, I need to design on how frequently I'll be pushing the data to my business users so that they can make a decision, the pattern maybe, and then where I should keep the data, what type of storage I should provision, what sort of compute should I use. If I have a relational database, How much should do I need to scale vertically or I want to scale horizontally? So a lot of platform level decisions happens, and then comes the database level design decisions. So database level design decisions like what sort of workload that I have. Is it a OLTP? Some terminologies are there which we call as online transaction processing. Whether my application is OLTP, whether it is OLAP, or whether it is something. It's a vast thing actually, team. It's a very vast thing when you start thinking on designing part, right? So you need to think on certain strategies in the designing also, because I wanted to cover that in one of my application example also. But let me, since this question has come now, I'll explain a bit of things now. So like a data warehouse, if I have something huge data that I want to, review, I can have data warehouse solution for that. And if I have something, let's say my OLTP workload, how can I segregate that workload? Like for example, I should develop some strategy so that my database tables can be structured in that way that it should be that OLTP tables are in separate database, and then staging. Sometimes what you do is in the application designs, you process some data, massage some data, which you have got from various different sources. Then you, let's say from some Excel sheet, you pull some data. Your application design is such that. And then from a PDF file, you pull some data. And from a text file, you pull some data from different relational database. For example, if you're processing the data in SQL, maybe you want to get some data out from Oracle systems, for example. So you're getting data from various different sources, and then you massage that data somewhere in your database. So for that, you need to have staging database separate, the stage put to handle the staging workload. And then comes your logging. So your application might be logging some data, right? You don't want to push the logging data to your secondary servers. Let's say if you have high availability solution and you have different region, Mumbai and Bangalore, some logging data or some the massaging data that I talked about, right? The staging workload and the logging workload. So anyways, this data is like temporary, even if server it is not a data loss. So logging also, you don't want to move to or push the data to secondary. That can avoid the network latency. So we think on those directions also. And then we create the separate logging tables. And then comes your strategies like archival strategy. Do I want to archive more data? I want to retain the data for how long? Whether I should retain it for 10 years, 20 years, right? So for that also, you should have separate archival databases that should be separate from your OLTP workload, because you will not be accessing that data very frequently. You will be accessing it, let's say, for example, your medical records, right? So your medical records says, you go for some diagnostic test in a lab, and then that lab these days gives you online report. Now you are the user of that application. So that user, that is you, will not be assessing your report every day, but you might want to access that report after, let's say, 1 year when you have another test done from that same laboratory, so that you can relate things. Now, that lab application need to maintain your data so that it can help make your decision what happened in my previous analysis lab report, what is going on now. So then that application team, the lab application will actually do, if you imagine the new reports are generating every day, right? Then what they will do is they will have some archival databases separately to push the data, which is older than, let's say, 1 month or maybe older than 2 months, because user has already seen that, right? So that you will keep it in an archival database. And then similar to that, we can have a lot of design things, a lot of design considerations in your environment. And then you can also have a design consideration wherein, if I'm talking about the tweet processing, right? So what we will do is we will have to dump somewhere. For example, so let's say I have a Twitter now, okay? from Twitter, I need to have some mean to pull the data. And then after pulling the data, I need to dump it somewhere. I need to store the data somewhere. And then on top of it, I need to align some service, database service, to process that data, right? And now I need to decide how I will be processing the data, how much scale I need to apply for the data. Once I have done the processing, then I need to say, I need to plug in some other technology like a Power BI or reporting services to view that data. So your management can view that data. So those things also comes into design considerations. And then whether you want to apply some machine learning model on top of that data, that will also come into picture. So all these things will actually come into the architecture designs. And also the challenges, right? One more example I want to give, which will be very important for you all because you are the developers, the strategy of partitioning in the database world. So what happens is when we have our discussions with the application teams like you, right? What we do is what they tell us is application is running very slow. Your database is not good. So that fight actually comes into the picture. That application has written a code in a better way. Database is also performing fine, but why my queries are running slow? All right. So in order to cater that thing, what we do is we suggest our customer or application vendors, the developers, that why don't you have some partitioning strategy so that you can partition your data tables into multiple partitions. That way, what happens is, let's say your table A, let's say, for example, country data. Okay. The country data can stay in one physical file, and then states table, let's say, I mean, one country can have multiple states, right? States table can be into different file. So that way, what you're doing here is, when you're pulling the data from the database server, you are pulling it from two different files. So you imagine you're reducing the number of IOPS, you're optimizing the number of IOPS that you're doing on a database by pulling the data from different files. So that partitioning strategy also comes into picture during the design phase itself, because designing partitioning strategy out after the product is launched and after the product is in production becomes sometimes a bit difficult. So these strategies we keep into mind. And then I can keep on speaking on this thing. So then I'll tell you one more example, then I'll hold on to this thought, this thing, because I'll be consuming most of your time here. So one more example I want to give is, like, let's say your the workload, right, that you have. We talked about physical partitions, maybe on some. Pranav, you have additional question, or it is on the same line? Zia, could you read it for me, please?
Yes, let me.
If it
Okay.
is related to this, then because
Many
I
times-
can keep on speaking on this. So I hope I was able to answer this question first, the design question.
Right. So let me read through the question.
Sure.
It says,
sure.
many times we say Instagram server is down, Facebook is down. I want to know
Huh.
why such things happen. Is it related to some database level issue or anything else?
So yeah, I mean, if any site is down, it can be related to anything. It can be related to the application servers, because these applications, right, the Instagram or Facebook can have multiple application servers where you have hosted the application. It can be a problem at any layer. Let's say, and also you have a application which is hosted on multi-region. Let's say, because Facebook, I mean, you cannot expect Facebook to be operating only from US if it is developed in US, right? So Facebook has its data scattered across all the countries, right? So since you are close to a region, so you will be accessing the data from that particular region. So it can be very well possible that there could be a regional outage, right? So the companies have divided their workload in that direction. It can be a regional outage. Now, regional outage can be of multiple reasons. It can be a database down situation also. So if a database is down, you hardly see Instagram or Facebook down, right? because what happens is we have the high availability and another term we call it as disaster recovery solutions already in place. What we do in that is we ensure that one thing that our database is in sync in multiple locations, right? If I have hosted, I will not rely on a single data center. I will how one more design consideration we have is just adding to the previous question as well, that we ensure that if I am having a website hosted on a single data center, if it is a banking application or something Facebook like application, I will ensure that I have the high availability of that database, not in that same data center. I should be having the high availability in different data center, wherein the power that I'm getting. So what happens is, like, if let's say a data center outage is there, let's say one data center has got some disaster. For example, we have seen flood-like situations somewhere, right? Flood-like situations if there is in any part of the country. So your application is actually running from that site. So what we will ensure is that your application should be running on a different data center, which will have a different power source, so that if, let's say, some power is cut on one of the data center, we should be able to fail over immediately to the another data center, which have a different power supply source, internet provider, service provider source. So those things we consider. And since we have high availability, we immediately switch to those different data center. If there is a regional outage, we ensure that we have if our application is really critical, we invest more money and we ensure that we have data center, let's say, at a far distance, let's say maybe a 1500-kilometer distance as well. So let's say my that is the near data center, which I have kept for the high availability solution, is also down. In that case, what we do is we switch to the another location altogether, that is at a far location, so that our application users are not impacted. So outages can be of many ways. Database can be down, yes. Application servers can be down, yes. Network outage can be there, yes. Some hacker may be trying to push massive amount of workload to those servers so that the servers get chalked up. That can also be there, yes. For that, those are very common attacks that we used to have in our database world. What hackers used to do is they used to push massive amount of connections to our server. Let's say they can write a script, an automated script to open load of connections to my facebook.com, for example. Then because my database server, where I have hosted my server, has limited compute in on-premises world, that is when what will happen is I'll not be able to handle so many requests, right? So in that situation, my database can be down as well, yes. So that is another reason. But yeah, we are able to, because these things we are aware, we know how to handle those situations as well. In the back end, we have a separate database to manage those things as well. Like we understand from what IPs that threat is coming. So we have real-time threat detection technologies into our cloud world. So these type of attacks that I've told about, we have capabilities to manage those attacks as well. We have certain algorithms written in the background, which will actually assess those attackers and will try to block those things when it comes to our database. Yeah, the request that comes to our database. I see one more question, Zia.
Yes, I'm reading it.
Does that answer your question,
Pranav. So that was Pranav.
Pranav? Sorry. Pranav, does that answer your question? Like you had a question. Is your question answered or you have a follow-up question? All right.
I think you said yes. Okay. So the next question is, how does companies deal with virus attacks on databases?
Virus attacks on databases. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things. A virus attack cannot hit a database directly. That is first thing. So there are multiple security layers on top of a database. So databases will come into picture at a very later stages. So if you talk about the attackers, they will first try to penetrate into your network, right? So there is a network security layer that companies have or the data centers have to isolate themselves from the internet locations, or they will have their own private environment, private IPs and all, which will actually differentiate them from the public. And then they will have their own firewall to block those malicious attackers, right? So those firewall will be a blocker, and then their Active Directory will be a blocker. Certain users will be allowed to access your database. And after your Active Directory, you will have some internal security groups. What people generally do is, for example, if you just giving you an example, wherein you can have multi-factor authentication. What happens is, if in a credit card, if you're changing your password also, what will happen is, if you will first enter your earlier password and you'll answer a few security questions. What we will do is we will match those security questions in the backend. And let's say you have answered those security questions also correctly, then we will send you an OTP on your phone as well, so that we can validate that the user is, whoever is entering it, the information is correct, right? So there are multi-factor authentication also is there that can be leveraged. And then comes your database level security as well. So in the database level also, you define the securities, you define the roles. Let's say if an application user is there, you define the application user role, and you give limited number of permissions to the application user. And if the user is a DBA, database administrator, you will give more users to that DBA. If it is a senior DBA, you will give more permissions to that senior DBA. And if you are a developer, because developer don't want to maintain the database, right? It is just that a developer needs to develop a program or a procedure or a function or a table, and then the developer wants to deal with that. So you don't need to have a permission to drop a table which you are not supposed to touch or which you are not supposed to drop. So we can have those settings at that granular level as well. So, and then we have certain services on top of it, like vulnerability assessment scannings we have, so that we can identify the vulnerabilities present in the database, any security permissions, or the password maybe is not a strong password, or you don't have the certificate, a security certificate, the SSL certificate, or we have some security protocols also. We used to have SSL, right? We used to, some time back, SSL 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Then SSL had some security breaches. Then we started having TLS 1.0, 1.1, 1.2. So that is again blocking the attackers or security layer itself. So a lot of things are there. And even in the development cycle also, just 1 second.
Sure.
Even in the development thing also, like SQL injections are very common, right? We used to be very common. If let's say you have written a procedure or stored procedure wherein you have given a string, right? So what hacker can identify, if you have given a string, that hacker can just replace that string with some, if hacker is able to penetrate into your application, that user can change that string into some drop statement maybe, right? Or maybe they can block your account or something. They can write that script in that string, and once that stored procedure is executed, which was intended to do different activity, and then it does a different activity. So those things are there, but these days, a lot of powerful things are there in the database world, which are capable to manage or handle those. Yes, yeah.
All right. So I see that you have like 4 more slides for us. I wanted to know what were you planning?
Yeah, actually, I have covered in the application example, I have covered here only. So I was like, okay, let's cover it here only.
Hi,
one thing-
Atinder. Actually,
Yeah,
I have
sorry.
one question for you. You said that you do partition for the country and the state to improve the performance for the application. So
Right.
when it is working slow, like here, my
Mhm.
question is, now every country has one state, every state has one city linked to it. So in that case, then do we need to do the partition?
Yeah, I mean, this is just an example. You're saying if a country has one state,
Yeah.
and,
Then
and
for that country has one state, and again for the state has one more city. So it
Mhm.
goes and on, right? I mean, like So then in
Yeah.
that case, then do we need to do the partition to improve the performance for the application?
If it is just one data, then you don't need a partition. But if you think that I can have massive amount of data into a table one, I mean, just if I don't take an example of a city or state, because they are very limited, right? I just gave you a hypothetical example wherein if you have a massive amount of data in one table and massive amount of data in second table, in that case, you can consider partitioning so that your workload can be segregated into multiple physical files. And then let's say I have a drive E is an echo, and then I have a drive F. I can put these two files in different drives. So let's say if I'm joining the data, let's say I'm select country name from countries and select country name, comma, let's say state name from countries table, and then I join the states table. Then I just imagine I'll be pulling the data from two different drives. That way, I have distributed my work or distributed my load between two capable disks, right? So it is just a matter of distributing your workload. And as I mentioned, that you now have a capability of scaling it horizontally. So what you can do is if you have partitioned in such a way that your countries data, I mean, just giving you an example of a country, it's not right example, but yeah, example is like if you have massive amount of data in a single table also, and you have partitioned the data based upon the date range, because your application requires that you should have, I mean, I'll be pulling the data based upon my date ranges. Like I want to pull the data which is of January month. And then if you imagine a January month can have a terabyte of data. Now pulling the data, a terabyte of data, time consuming task, but you partition it in such a way that you have 30 partitions for a month. So now you can imagine that if you have 30 partitions, you can scale it to 30 different servers. And then if you're pulling the data for, let's say, 2 days or for 1 month itself, the data is being fetched from various, like in 30 different partitions, it will be more faster as compared to a single file, right? So that is the intention behind partitioning.
But again, this is like huge work for the database developer because this goes on and on. So in that case, do we have any alternate option for this?
Correct. You're right, actually.
Because if we take an example of, let's say now you are going to create an account to the Azure side, so there we can see like they ask the countries, and then again in the country they ask for the city, and then you have to, because there are a lot of countries in the world, so that way I was
Correct.
thinking like then how they manage that. If we go for the partition, then it will be huge work for the developer. So in that case, like if we get any alternate option, it will be good for the database developer.
Yeah, it is not a huge work for the developer, but it is just that we have it something, in the database world. It is just right click on the table and then you can define the partitions based on the date range. You don't need to develop anything. You don't need to write any code for that. It is something that is available on your, available in the database system. It is just that you need to take a decision as a developer, what column that I should partition based upon. Is it a date range that I need to partition on? Or is it, let's say, any other, let's say, a state-wise data you want to partition on, a state column maybe, a state name or a state ID maybe, or you maybe want to, if it is a school application, maybe you want to partition based upon the school IDs, right? Or whether if it is some hospital data, then you can maybe partition based upon the hospital ID. So you need to take a decision on which column should I be enabling partition on. Once you take that decision, you just have to just right click on your table and then align the partitions.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Create the partitions. A database will do it for you actually. You don't need to write any code, separate code for that.
Yeah, no number of options are available. Yeah.
A lot of options are there. It is just that you, being a developer, you need you are aware of. You should be, like I mentioned, in the design perspective as well. You need to understand how my data growth will be. how will be the future of this table that I am designing? Will my country's table grow to terabytes? If yes, I should design my partition strategy ahead of time so that I can avoid the repercussions after later. Because later point of time when it is in production, it becomes very difficult to implement partition. I mean, it can be done that point also. We have done it on multiple customer environments, but that point it becomes a bit difficult. So that's why I'm saying it should be beforehand only.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. I think we are reaching the end of our session. So thank you.
I wanted to say, is it? Can I take 5 more minutes because I want?
Sure.
I have one slide actually, Zia. I wanted to tell about my day-to-day
Sure.
work
Yes.
that I do in my current role. If audience is interested to hear, I can share that as well.
So I am interested.
I mean, I don't want to, push you all if it is already. I mean, you have some other plans, but if no, I can go for
That's all
5
right.
more
That's all
minutes.
right. Go ahead. Your stage.
All right, thank you. I hope I'm not boring your team. I hope my intention is to make things clearer for you, and yeah, so I can, and also to share as much information as I can share within this much time. So,
Sure,
yeah.
sure. Go for it.
All right. So the day-to-day activities that I do in my current role, in as a senior customer engineer, is that first of all, what we do is I go to a lot of Microsoft customers, that is the mission critical customers or the premier customers. So what we do is we sit with the team and we understand the application, understand the environment that customer has, and then while discussing, we have a whiteboard sort of session with the development team, with the database administrator team, security team, Active Directory team, platforms team, all of them sitting in a single room. Then we discuss about the architecture that they have, the challenges that they are facing in their applications, and we ask a lot of open-ended questions for that, those things. I don't do it single-handedly. I have a team also who specializes in different technologies like Active Directory, networking, and all. So we sit in a single room, and then we do a whiteboard session, list down the session challenges that customer has, and then we capture some of the data from the customer side. Then we set up the bi-weekly meetings or monthly meetings to process the workloads, share the progress of the challenges that they have listed to us, right? So then we prepare a work tracker for our customers to mitigate or to remediate the problems that they had, right? So this is something, if you'll see in the slide, I have mentioned some of the challenges you might see in the database world, right? So application team can say performance is low. I have a slow queries, inefficient code, because that is the fight that I told you earlier as well, that there's always a fight between a developer and a DBA, that a DBA will say you have not written it efficiently. Application team will say your SQL Server or your database is not performing optimally. So that fight is there. But ultimately, what we understand is why that fight is there. I'll give you one more example of a code level design that you should consider while we are talking, right? So, for example, you are writing queries or you're writing stored procedures, right? In those stored procedures or queries, when you join two different tables on a column, because there should be some common column, like for example, countries and the states, for example. So countries table will have country ID and state ID in that, or maybe a state column will have a country ID also, so that it can have some linkage based upon the country ID column. Now, if you're selecting the data from two different tables, and then you're using the two different columns, from table 1 and table 2, that is country ID in table 1 and country ID in table 2. If you're joining these two tables using a common column, that is when you need to ensure that the data types of those two columns should be same. If the data type is not same, that is when some of the performance problem starts. Because in the backend, you can write like if on our table 1 you have specified country ID as integer, and on table 2 you have specified country ID as varchar, right? So you can insert the data in both the tables. There is no limitation, and you can join these two tables also. But what will happen is that will have to, in order to understand the two columns or join the two columns, it will have to understand the linkage between the two, so that in the backend, what database will do is it will do the implicit data type conversion. That slows down the query performance, and that is one of the factors that you should consider. You should make a note of that as well. That implicit conversion should be avoided to the maximum. And also, I want to add one more thing: bad indexes. So if you do not have right indexes on your database, you can end up reading more data from a table. Instead, you could, if you are using a right indexes, you can limit your search. Let's say a table size is 100 GB. Now you are searching the data for, let's say, country name India. Now, if you have relevant index on a table, on a country column, what you will be doing is, instead of doing a read of a 500 GB, you will be restricting your read to only India's data. That is, maybe it can be a 10 GB data. So that way your queries can be optimized. So this is what we identify and tell it to our application developers, that we should create the indexes in such a way that we should avoid the unnecessary reads that we are doing on the table. So that is very important and crucial point. And then we do regular health checkups. We do POCs of new features that we just discussed, that multi-factor authentication, vulnerability assessment scans, and all whatnot, right? Security, role-based access controls. If you want to migrate to a different higher version of database, server consolidations. If your applications are small, and then why do you want to provision 10 servers for small applications? You can consolidate your workload to a single server, and you can have multiple databases. So the compute can be divided, right? So all these things actually, team, whatever I have listed here, I'll not go much detail because I have already taken 8 minutes more of the time. And then we showcase the value to our customers by mitigating those challenges. So it is just that identification of those things that we do, and then we help them or assist them in mitigating those things, right? So this is what I do on my day-to-day job. Any questions now?
Sure. Why can't we migrate from higher versions of database to the lower versions of database? So for example, if I'm using SQL 2019 right now, okay, why can't I restore or use my database on the version to 2017 or maybe 2016?
Okay. Why can't you restore? I mean, you can. What is the challenge that you face? I mean, it is just that if the limitation, I'll tell you what the limitation is. The limitation is if you have migrated to a SQL Server 2019 and your database is in production, if you want to take a backup of that database and then restore it on 2017 or 2016, it will not be restored. That is not possible. But you can extract, if you have a need to extract the data from your higher version of SQL Server, you can extract using the export utility maybe, and then you can import the data to your 2017 server. That is one option. Second option is you can use a replication technology which can work from higher version to a lower version as well. So that is also available. That is the second option. But limitation is you cannot restore, you cannot do a backup and restore on a lower version. Now, if your question is, why can't I do that? That is because we have certain design changes that we do in every version of SQL Server. That design changes, and we deprecate few features also. If we move forward to a newer version, for example, from 2012, SQL Server 2012 to SQL Server 2014, we have changed the complete algorithm of estimation. We call it something called cardinality estimation. Let's imagine you're from Delhi, for example. So what will happen is, just an example, okay? If I want to go from Chandigarh to Delhi, I can have different routes, right? But from SQL Server 2012 to 2014, I have changed the algorithm in the backend to find the shortest path to go from Chandigarh to Delhi. Instead of finding a bigger path because of the bad estimations, I can choose a smaller path. So I've changed some algorithms. I have introduced some new features in my new product. So that is why, because the features are already upgraded, I mean, the system or the metadata, which might not be relevant to your user data, but in the backend, we have updated that metadata of your database. So that is when you migrate to the new database, new version of SQL Server, you cannot move it back. You cannot restore the database.
Yeah.
But you have the options to extract the data and move it back to your previous version as well. Third option is, whenever you upgrade to a newer version of SQL Server, we have something called compatibility level. So compatibility level, if you go to the properties of your instance of SQL Server, the database properties, you can choose to use your previous features. Let's say you are upgraded to 2019, your compatibility level will be 150. You can choose the lower compatibility level so that you can utilize the same features, same performance, which you were getting in 2017 as well. So in that case, your 2019 features will not be utilized. Your 2017 features will be, or 2016 features will be utilized. So that is the third option that you have.
Okay. But then in that we will not be able to use the features of 2019 and 2017 simultaneously.
No, you cannot.
Okay.
You need to decide on one thing, whether you want to use 2019 features or 2017 features. So compatibility level will actually go on that. You can search for compatibility level. You will be able to figure it out. What does that mean? Or you can search for replication as well, SQL Server replication for higher to lower version synchronization. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
But I will not suggest that. You should not do that. It has a lot of challenges also. Like it requires a lot of design and understanding of the technology. So you should have someone from the database administrator team to assist you on that one. That is a dependency on the database team. Yeah.
All right, guys, we can take one last question.
Anyone, any question? It can be a very, if you feel that it is not a right question, that is not something that I should ask, please ask. I'll be happy to answer that as well. Or if I may ask, like, I hope I was able to clear the questions. I was able to explain the database to some extent, considering the time that I had. So I hope I was able to answer your questions, and to some extent you are more familiar with your database world and all. Can I have that answer to my question? Ajit, you unmuted. You wanted to say?
Yeah, just one call I'm getting. Yeah, thanks. That is a very good session, and we got to know how to do this in like Microsoft organization, and we got a lot of knowledge from you. Okay, in the small period of time. If you have a chance, we have I think so. Yeah, we have 8-week plan. If you give one more chance to him, so we will get more knowledge on databases, because the database is like you told, database is like a fuel. Okay, so because every application have that, and we are also running a small organization, and we are daily struggling with the slow application, slow performance, and so couple of things we got to know. Okay, so how to do the partition, and we will somehow practical session or any example with this partitioning and indexing all the things. Okay, so it will resolve our issues. Okay, actually, that need Zia's help for here. Sorry. Okay. And one more question from my friend. Okay, like small applications. Okay, so can we go with Microsoft SQL or Oracle or any open source databases? It's like a
Anything-
customer.
Yeah,
Customer.
I mean, it depends actually. I would say it depends. I mean, I personally, because I have worked in heterogeneous environment, multiple environments, I have explored various products as well, like open source as well, and different like Oracle as well, SQL Server as well. I'll not rate any product here. I'll not rate that that product is better or that is not that good. But I personally feel for a user standpoint, I comfortably or I feel SQL Server is very handy because a lot of things are actually present in GUI manner. Graphical user interface is very robust, and a lot of, like you said, query level challenges that you're facing. So we have something called Database Engine Tuning Advisor. You can search for it online. You will be able to explore that. That can assist you in optimizing your queries. And a lot of new features that have come up in SQL Server 2019 as well, like adaptive query plans, adaptive query joins, intelligent query processing, query store. A lot of features are there in SQL Server product because I have been working into this product since a long time. It is for a small application or even if for a bigger applications, I'm supporting this product. Even supporting like 20 terabytes of a database size. Having one of the example I'll give you, like one of my application has like 144 physical cores machine, 12 terabytes RAM, out of which 8 terabyte we have capped for a SQL Server, and then 20 terabyte of physical disk database file. That also we have a seamless experience on that application as well. So it depends on your expertise and your database team, which product they want to utilize. But database technology is evolving, and all the products are good, I would say. I personally like SQL Server the most.
That is amazing, Atinder. It's impressive.
Thank you, Zian. Thank you for having me.
Sure,
I
sure.
like the audience. I mean, because if we interact, that is when that conversation becomes more meaningful, and that helps us also to understand that whether I'm able to communicate the right message to my audience or not. So thank you so much, team. Thank you for having me.
All right, Atinder. Thank you so much for coming here. We are like, it's really an honor to have you here. Thanks, man. Thank you so much. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
I'll drop
Thanks.
now.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, team. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.